The agreement came not with celebration, but with calculation. After days of escalation along the Thailand-Cambodia border, both governments emerged from a high-stakes negotiation in Malaysia with an announcement of ceasefire. For the average citizen in Phnom Penh or Bangkok, this moment may have felt like a breath held too long, finally released. But in the world of geopolitics, such exhalations rarely mean peace. They often signal only a pause, a recalibration, a temporary return to dialogue after the imbalance of force has been exposed. The reality is cold, yet undeniable. The Thai military holds overwhelming superiority. In air power, in ground deployment, in strategic command and readiness. This asymmetry was no secret before the conflict began. But now, it has become unavoidably visible. In the words of Verapat Pariawong, a legal advisor and former special counsel to Thailand's deputy prime minister, Cambodia found itself in a position where continued confrontation was no longer practical. That practicality, rooted not in moral clarity or mutual goodwill, but in the language of power and cost, defined the logic behind the ceasefire. Thailand's posture had remained measured. Despite its capacity to escalate further, it chose restraint. Not because it could not win a confrontation, but because it had little to gain from one. The balance of interests, not ideology, shaped the negotiation space. The meeting in Malaysia was swift. The press conference that followed, brief and asymmetrical. On one side, Cambodia's leadership spoke at length, attempting to justify its position. On the other, Thailand's acting prime minister delivered minimal remarks, calculated silence, signaling confidence, but not overreach. This contrast in tone reflected not only the imbalance on the ground, but also the different levels of leverage both nations brought to the negotiating table. Yet despite the ceasefire, the deeper risks remain intact. Ceasefires are not conclusions, they are conditions. Conditions that can shift, dissolve, or be reinterpreted at any moment. And in Southeast Asia, where historical grievances mix with fragile borders and unpredictable politics, the difference between a truce and a turning point is often razor-thin. The immediate challenge now is one of containment. Containment of rhetoric, containment of blame, and above all, containment of firepower. Ceasefires are fragile by nature. They rely not only on official declarations, but on discipline at the command level, communication across borders, and a shared understanding of what escalation would cost. That understanding remains uneven. The conflict revealed more than just military positioning. It exposed a strategic truth that Cambodia has long struggled to offset. A truth rooted in asymmetry, not only in weapons, but in economy, diplomacy, and global attention. Cambodia has limited options, and it knows it. Thailand knows it too. That recognition, though unspoken in official statements, quietly defines the next phase of this confrontation. Now, with the ceasefire in place, the question is not whether it will hold. The question is whether either side believes it should. The foundation of every ceasefire is the illusion of parity. But in this case, the illusion is wearing thin. Thailand did not rush into war. It did not posture loudly. It did not mobilize beyond what was tactically necessary. Instead, it let the disparity speak for itself. Its fighter jets took the skies not to devastate, but to demonstrate. Its armored columns did not cross deep into Cambodian territory, but they stood close enough, ready enough, to make the costs of continued engagement unmistakable. This was not just a military maneuver. It was a message, written in hardware, directed not only at Phnom Penh, but at every regional capital watching from a distance. Cambodia understood the message. So did Malaysia. And perhaps so did China and the United States. At the Kuala Lumpur negotiations, both U.S. and Chinese representatives were present. They did not speak publicly. But their presence was no accident. Each has strategic interests in the region. and each sees the Thailand-Cambodia conflict not as a local squabble, but as a potential ignition point in a region already tense with overlapping alliances and historical scars. Cambodia's calculus in inviting broader international attention was simple. Leverage cannot be found in arms, so it must be found in optics. By broadening the table, Phnom Penh hoped to dilute Thailand's advantage, to bring in arbiters who might restrain Bangkok, or offer Phnom Penh a softer diplomatic landing. This is a classic tactic of weaker states. To internationalize the bilateral. To move the struggle from battlefield to conference room, where words might level what weapons cannot. But Cambodia's attempt fell short. Neither the United States, nor China, nor Malaysia intervened in any meaningful way beyond encouraging de-escalation. They did not condemn Thailand. They did not recognize Cambodia's claims. And they certainly did not offer the kind of security guarantees Phnom Penh might have hoped for. Their role was supportive, not determinative. And in cold logic, support without enforcement is only noise. This leads to an uncomfortable truth for Cambodia. It stands largely alone. Even as Prime Minister Hun Manet sought to draw on the shadow of his father's historical relationships, even as letters were filed with the International Court of Justice in The Hague, the global system offered no firm hand, no blue helmets, no emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, no ASEAN rapid deployment, nor even a firm statement. This is not neglect. This is calculation. The region and the world are not eager to escalate over Preah Vihear. Thailand, on the other hand, has no interest in conquest. Its goals are not expansionist, but strategic. It seeks stability along its eastern frontier, but not at the cost of occupation or international backlash. This is why the ceasefire, however temporary, aligns with Thai interests. A war would be short, but costly. A truce, especially one on terms shaped by strength, is preferable. Now, the challenge moves from the battlefield to the bureaucracies. Both nations must decide whether to return to the Joint Border Committee mechanism, the JBC, a structure long used to manage disputes. It is procedural. It is technical. But in geopolitics, these dull mechanisms often matter more than declarations. Because they define how memory is shaped, how maps are redrawn, how sovereignty is interpreted not in slogans, but in coordinates. If Cambodia refuses to return to the JBC, it risks isolation. If Thailand refuses, it risks appearing overconfident. But if both return, under pressure and without resolution of the military imbalance, then the ceasefire becomes something else. Not a step toward peace, but a pause between provocations. The geography of Southeast Asia has never been neutral. It is shaped by rivers, ridges, fault lines, and the residual wounds of colonial borders. And along those borders, Preah Vihear remains one of the most symbolically charged. More than a temple, it is a monument to contested sovereignty. A relic claimed by both, owned by one, and protected by law that each interprets differently. This legal ambiguity has long been the spark, but not the fuel. The fuel is political. It lies in the narratives of nationalism, the calculation of domestic legitimacy, and the shifting alliances between Southeast Asia's power centers. In Cambodia, the leadership under Hun Manet stands in transition. His authority is not yet fully internalized. He inherits a network built by his father, but must now justify it through independent decisions. And in times of crisis, new leaders often reach for the most familiar instrument of power: external conflict. This is not unique to Cambodia. It is a common pattern across fragile democracies and hybrid regimes. When legitimacy is unclear at home, attention is directed outward. Territory becomes identity. Military presence becomes political posture. And the line between defensive maneuver and symbolic escalation blurs. Hun Manet, by pursuing international attention, by referencing historical grievances, by pushing toward legal forums like the International Court of Justice, is not only addressing Thailand, he is addressing his own people and the international community he hopes will recognize Cambodia as more than just a minor actor caught in Thailand's shadow. Thailand, by contrast, operates from a position of strategic maturity. Its domestic politics, though turbulent, are buffered by institutional depth and military tradition. Its armed forces are not reactive. They are calibrated, designed for endurance, not spectacle. The Thai response to the recent conflict illustrates this posture. Measured deployments, minimal press exposure, limited rhetoric, and clear coordination with allies behind closed doors. This is not restraint for the sake of peace. It is restraint for the sake of credibility. In geopolitics, credibility is currency. Thailand cannot afford to appear reckless, especially when facing scrutiny from Washington, Beijing, and Jakarta simultaneously. Its military power must be seen not only as superior, but as stable. That is why it refused to expand the conflict beyond necessity. It sent a signal, then paused. It inflicted losses, then stopped short of occupation. It offered ceasefire, from strength, not desperation. Now, the question is not only about military outcomes, but about narrative control. Cambodia will attempt to frame this as a diplomatic success. That the ceasefire was not imposed, but negotiated. That international actors, including the United States, China, and Malaysia, played a role in limiting escalation. But, in reality, the truce was forced by the geometry of power. The presence of American or Chinese diplomats did not alter the trajectory. They observed. They counseled. But they did not constrain. Because neither had the appetite nor the incentive to entangle themselves in a bilateral border dispute with no strategic upside. The region understands this. ASEAN, despite its language of unity, has been conspicuously silent. There is no ASEAN peacekeeping force. No binding dispute resolution process. Just communiques, statements, and protocols. And in this silence, Thailand hears permission. Cambodia hears abandonment. That is the nature of cold logic in a multipolar world. Power is acknowledged, but not challenged. Weakness is understood, but not rescued. And regional order is preserved not through balance, but through asymmetry that is simply allowed to persist. As the guns fall silent, attention turns to process. The ceasefire is not an endgame, it is a framework. A space in which each side recalculates risk, tests diplomatic openings, and repositions assets both on the ground and within international institutions. But beneath that choreography, two divergent strategies are unfolding. Thailand is consolidating. Cambodia is appealing. Consolidation for Thailand means reinforcing its border command structure, maintaining readiness, and signaling to both domestic and foreign observers that it remains firmly in control. Its goals are limited but precise. Avoid occupation. Deter provocation. Secure its frontier. Nothing more. Nothing less. It has no need to escalate, because escalation would erode the very stability it values. Thailand gains nothing from war. But it gains everything from a reputation that it cannot be provoked without consequence. Cambodia's strategy, by contrast, hinges on externalization. Without parity on the battlefield, it seeks influence through institutions. The mention of the International Court of Justice was not incidental. It was deliberate. A signal that Cambodia intends to move the conflict into legal and diplomatic terrain, where power asymmetries are less dominant, and where historical grievances can be reframed in terms of international norms. But here, the limitations become evident. No formal case has yet been listed at the court. No urgent hearings have been called. The ICJ does not move at the pace of geopolitics. It is methodical. It is reactive. And it lacks enforcement teeth. Filing a complaint is not a strategy. It is a symbol. And Cambodia, at this stage, is operating in the realm of symbols. Hun Manet's remarks, the lengthy press conference, the overt gratitude toward international mediators, all serve a single purpose: to reframe Cambodia's position as that of a responsible actor. A government that seeks peace, that honors law, and that deserves diplomatic space. But Thailand, in keeping its remarks minimal, made the counter-narrative clear. It has the upper hand. And it will not grant equal diplomatic footing unless compelled. This creates a political trap for Cambodia. If it returns to bilateral talks under the Joint Border Committee, it may be seen domestically as capitulating to Thai terms. If it refuses and continues to seek international adjudication, it may further isolate itself in a region where sovereignty is prized above intervention. No ASEAN member wishes to see international courts reshape borders or set precedents for third-party arbitration. And so, even as Cambodia speaks the language of diplomacy, it finds few eager listeners. The larger powers, China and the United States, each have their own constraints. For China, Cambodia is a strategic partner, but one of many. Its importance lies in naval access, economic alignment, and political consistency. It is not vital enough to warrant confrontation with Thailand, especially given Beijing's ongoing maritime interests in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea. For the United States, stability is the paramount interest. It supports democracy, but not disorder. It values regional partnerships, but not entanglement in border disputes that lack clear strategic dividends. And both powers, while present in Malaysia, offered nothing beyond rhetorical support. Because for them, this is not a war worth owning. Thus, Cambodia remains boxed in, diplomatically overextended, militarily overmatched, and politically under pressure to deliver a narrative that masks strategic regression. It is here, in this moment of forced restraint, that we must ask a deeper question. What is the endgame? Not of the ceasefire, but of the confrontation itself. The endgame is not peace. At least, not in the way most understand it. It is not the cessation of hostilities for moral reasons. It is not reconciliation driven by shared history or mutual empathy. Rather, it is equilibrium. A recognition by both sides that further conflict diminishes leverage, while controlled calm can preserve face. For Thailand, the endgame is already within reach. It has demonstrated dominance without excess. It has reminded both its neighbors and its allies of its operational readiness. And it has reinforced its image as a regional power that acts decisively but with discipline. Any future negotiations, be they legal or diplomatic, will begin with that backdrop, with the understanding that Bangkok holds not only more soldiers, but more options. For Cambodia, the road is far more complex. Hun Manet faces a series of interwoven dilemmas. How to justify a ceasefire framed by loss. How to maintain internal unity amid strategic retreat. And how to extract concessions when few are being offered. His instinct, as seen in the Malaysia conference, is to internationalize, to create the appearance of multilateral concern, even if real enforcement never materializes. But this path is fraught with limitations. The international system is overstretched. And Cambodia is not Ukraine, not Taiwan, not Gaza. Its geopolitical weight does not command urgency. Its sovereignty, while respected, is not sacred to the great powers. It is conditional. This is not a statement of morality. It is the architecture of global realism, where intervention is proportional to interest, where morality aligns with resources, where diplomacy without leverage is merely performance. And so Cambodia's pivot toward legal forums, toward statements of grievance, must be seen for what it is: a delay, a diversion, A hope that with time, memory fades and pressure softens. But cold logic does not rely on hope. It observes patterns. And the pattern here is unmistakable. This ceasefire, far from resolving the conflict, has institutionalized the imbalance. It has created a precedent where military inferiority must be offset by diplomatic theater, where the weaker party must appeal to symbols, while the stronger defines the terms. This is not a stable outcome. It is a cycle. And unless broken, it will repeat. In Bangkok, military analysts are already adjusting posture. The Thai armed forces, though demobilizing publicly, are repositioning assets for faster future response. Airstrips near the border remain operational. Intelligence surveillance continues. And civil-military coordination is being hardened, not because another war is imminent, but because deterrence must be made permanent, a visible, credible threat of response, to ensure that political adventurism from Phnom Penh remains rhetorical, not operational. In Phnom Penh, the opposite process is unfolding. The military is regrouping. Public messaging is recalibrating. And within elite circles, there is quiet frustration. Frustration that international support did not arrive as expected. Frustration that ASEAN remained passive. And frustration that once again, the shadow of Thailand could not be escaped. But the risk now is not open war. It is political instability. If the ceasefire is interpreted domestically as failure, if the loss of strategic terrain or military personnel becomes too visible, then Hun Manet may face growing dissent. From within the military, from within the party, or worse, from the ghosts of dynastic power still lingering behind the curtain. In this fragile moment, both nations are treading carefully, but not equally. One is managing optics after demonstrating strength. The other is managing consequences after revealing weakness. And the world is watching, but not intervening. Because in cold logic, observation is often the only action. What remains now is uncertainty. Structured but unspoken. Defined not by treaties but by postures. Because despite the ceasefire, no agreement has been signed that redraws borders, clarifies legal claims, or binds either side to enforcement mechanisms. All that has been achieved is silence. A silence that could be broken by an error, by a provocation, or by a political shift. In that silence, strategic actors are recalibrating. Washington is calculating the cost of involvement. It sees the Thai military as a stable partner. It views Cambodia as a node within China's orbit. But the conflict does not serve U.S. interests directly. So it engages passively, with statements of concern, but without action. No sanctions. No deployments. No incentives. Just diplomacy on standby. Beijing is doing the opposite. It is watching carefully, but saying almost nothing. Its influence in Cambodia is well established. Infrastructure projects, naval access, political sponsorship. But Beijing is not inclined to be dragged into a conflict it did not initiate, especially with Thailand, a country it also courts economically. For China, this is not a time to choose sides. It is a time to preserve influence in both capitals while appearing neutral. So it sends no envoy. It issues no condemnation. And it hopes that Cambodia draws its own conclusions. That reliance on China alone is not enough when facing kinetic threats. ASEAN, as always, remains structurally incapable of acting. Its charter prohibits coercive measures between member states. It has no enforcement wing, no unified security doctrine, and no appetite for intra-bloc arbitration. What remains is dialogue, statements, meetings, but no pressure, no intervention. no leverage. Thus, the regional order survives, not because of cooperation, but because stronger states impose costs on weaker ones, without being stopped. Thailand understands this dynamic deeply. It has played the ASEAN game long enough to know its limits. That is why it did not ask for support. It did not bring the matter to the ASEAN summit, because it did not need to. Its deterrent was not institutional, but material. And its objective was not a multilateral consensus. It was singular. End the confrontation, with dominance intact. The result? An informal victory. No declaration, no flag raised, no occupation. But a victory all the same. Because perception, in geopolitics, is often more enduring than facts. The image of Thai fighter jets asserting airspace. The silence of Cambodia's partners. The retreat of ground forces. And the desperate pivot to legal language. These impressions will linger long after diplomats return home. Yet Cambodia still has one move left. Not military, not legal, but political. To redefine the narrative domestically as a noble resistance. To reframe the outcome not as failure, but as restraint. That Cambodia could have escalated. That Cambodia chose peace. That Cambodia acted in defense of culture, of sovereignty, of memory. And that this chapter, though closed for now, will one day be revisited. This strategy relies not on truth, but on time. If the Thai government shifts, if ASEAN reforms, if international attention returns, then perhaps Cambodia believes the balance may tip. But in the short term, this is wishful positioning. The battlefield has already rendered its verdict. And diplomacy will only confirm what weapons have implied. So we arrive at the penultimate question. Not what has happened, but what will be allowed to happen next. Because ceasefires are not conclusions. They are invitations for new alignments, new strategies, and perhaps new mistakes. There is a final truth beneath this ceasefire, one that transcends maps and headlines. It is the recognition that in a region defined by unresolved history, power is the only guarantee of voice. And when power is unequal, so too is the peace that follows. Thailand has not won a war, but it has imposed a pause on its terms, backed by force, framed by diplomacy, and sustained by the passive consent of an international system unwilling to intervene. That is not peace. It is balance under pressure. Cambodia, meanwhile, remains suspended between defiance and dependence. Defiance in its appeals to law. Dependence in its reliance on actors who remain reluctant to act. It sought solidarity and found sympathy. It invoked sovereignty and received silence. And in doing so, it now faces the quiet isolation that follows unmet expectations. The next chapter will not be written in courtrooms. It will be shaped on the ground, by patrols, by surveillance, by the slow daily recalibration of presence and posture. Because in contested spaces like Preavi here, it is not treaties that matter. It is who shows up, who stays, and who can afford to leave nothing to chance. This reality is not new, but it is sharpened by modern geopolitics. The great powers are overextended. Regional alliances are loose. Multilateralism is performative. And the burden of deterrence now falls, increasingly, on the states themselves. Those who can protect their interests do. Those who cannot must adapt or defer. This is the new Southeast Asian equation, one where diplomacy does not prevent war. It follows it. One where ASEAN is a stage, not a shield. One where the language of rights is hollow unless accompanied by readiness. And one where the lines on a map, however ancient or sacred, mean nothing without the capacity to defend them. For Thailand, this moment reinforces its strategic credibility. It remains a regional anchor, stable, armed, and uninterested in conquest. For Cambodia, the lesson is less comfortable. Power without alliances is brittle. Alliances without power are performative. And when neither is sufficient, even the language of legality falls flat. The world may not be watching closely, but cold logic is. Because it understands what these episodes reveal. That in the great narrative of global order, it is not law that writes the script. It is force, moderated by restraint. It is diplomacy, shaped by imbalance. And it is silence, observed by those who understand that true equilibrium is never granted. It is imposed. And so the ceasefire holds. Not because the war has ended, but because the stronger side has chosen, for now, not to fight.